Let's move on to the guest of the hour, which is Jeff Berwick. He is an anarcho-capitalist libertarian, a freedom fighter against mankind's two biggest enemies, as he says, the state and central banks, which I am a big opponent of the state and central banks myself. Jeff Berwick is the founder of the Dollar Vigilante, good old TDV, and is the CEO of TDV Media and Services, and a host of the popular video podcast Anarchist, which I was on. It's been a little while now, but I love that show. Jeff is also a very prominent speaker at many of the world's freedom, investment, and gold conferences, as well as regularly in the media, including CNBC, CNN, and Fox Business. Jeff also is one of the founders of Galts Gulch Chile. I've actually talked about Galts Gulch. I've talked about moving to different areas for a while now, not that I've made a move myself, but that I do entertain the idea and that I do like it. And he took this idea and this inspiration of Ayn Rand's in forming a new community based off of property rights and liberty. I wish the world already had that. Hopefully we can get a little bit of momentum started in one region and it'll spread to some others. And I think Gulch really has a forward-thinking mindset as far as building around a community that is based around individual freedom. So before I get on to my little babble tonight and talk too much, I want to bring on Jeff Berwick so I can bring him into the rabble. How you doing tonight, Jeff?
Good. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, good to have you on the show. You know, there is a lot of questions about Galts Gulch. Since we are leading off with that, and it's one of the questions I think Garrett wanted to ask. First, I have a variety of my own questions here too, but I am curious, how is Galts Gulch doing? For those who don't know, it's down in Chile, which is in South America. Wonderful place. I think it's got a good climate. It's a little bit more inviting agriculturally than maybe New Hampshire. Not to mention it's far away from the DEA and the IRS and a variety of other horrible central plan systems that we live under in America. But I know Jeff's actually in. Are you in Acapulco right now?
Yes, I am.
I figured as much. That's where your actual house is as of right now. But you have one in Galts Gulch too, right?
No, Galts Gulch just really started. There's no houses there or anything yet.
Okay, so I've heard of people. Who was it? Gabriel Shear. He was going to move there. I don't know what's going on with Gabriel and them and Galts Gulch down there. How's it going?
Good. I hear. I wasn't down there. I haven't been down there in quite a while. I've been working on the whole concept of Galts Gulch or creating these expat communities is quite a big idea. I've been looking at many other regions as well. Little inside tip, I'm looking at Honduras right now because the Honduras government has allowed some free zones in the country. They're just putting that into place right now, and it's going to be zones with basically no taxes, no government regulation, no laws. It's basically going to be its own little country inside of a country. So I'm very excited about that, and I've been looking at that quite deeply lately.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. This is that has brought up. It's always the market uncertainty in the world, and I think what I've seen, at least from Chile, and I think some of this did come from the Pinochet mindset from the late 70s and 80s, the revolution that happened in Chile. And in the area as a whole, mentally, the ideal of freedom itself, more propertarian in general over the last 40 years. And obviously we've seen Chile jump in the scale of economic freedom while the U.S. continues to decline, unfortunately. Not that I wish we would all increase in freedom, right, until the point where we had no government. But the point is, Chile actually is moving more towards economic freedom. My question is, and some of the other people have asked this, and I wanted to ask you this the last time you were on the show, but we didn't have the chance. There's a lot of things that government officials will say, like we're going to make this a free zone or freer zone or something like that. What incentivizes you to believe maybe some of these politicians maybe more than others? Because obviously I can trust maybe a local official that here locally at my own county more than I can Kim Jong-il, right? A national dictator or something like that who has much more control. So there is a difference. I can't say every single politician. They have some differences, although the system itself is usually the same and keeps them in the cog, right, as a cog in the machine. There are some differences. So what makes it so that when you look at Chile and you think about market uncertainty, that you don't have these concerns as you would from maybe some other region's dictator who's basically saying they're going to create a free zone and then maybe switching it up on you 10 years down the road?
Well, first of all, I should point out that Chile has not created a free zone at all. All that project is just a real estate project in Chile. So there's really nothing all that special in those terms about it. It's just a place where people can gravitate Chile is by far one of the better countries, or probably the best in terms of freedom in South America. They changed from like hardcore communism. Of course, all governments are communist at their core because they're all centrally planned, but they're the most. They went from really hardcore communism a few decades ago and really embraced a lot of free market principles. In fact, the last president was a big follower of Ayn Rand, and it just shows. You could just look at the countries around it, especially Argentina, which is right to the east, and that country has gone the exact opposite direction. You can see all the results. It's amazing that for some reason people haven't figured this out yet. I guess they don't have the internet or something. But every time that you go towards more government control, more centrally planned, more socialism, more communism, it gets worse. And every time you allow more freedom, it gets better. And places like Hong Kong and Dubai and Panama have shown those things. And things like North Korea versus South Korea. It's pretty clear which system generally works better for the people. The South Koreans are eating quite well. The North Koreans are eating themselves and dogs at this point, which is really sad. Hate to laugh, but not much I can do about it, unfortunately, at this point. And you look at things like West Germany and East Germany. Every single time in history when you've had two countries very nearby, or even part of the old same country that have been split up, and one goes more towards centrally controlled government planning, socialism or communism, and the other one allows some freedom. Now, of course, no government on earth has ever allowed total freedom. If they did, there wouldn't be a government. But it's just clear to see which works best. And I think thanks to the internet, we're going to see a lot of places start to wake up. I think programs like yours, and there's so many, there's literally thousands now popping up all over the world, and not just in English language now. There's lots of Spanish language and different languages. People are getting access to this information, and that's the thing. They really haven't had access to that information, much like many countries. A lot of these places, they get most of their information from the media, which is almost one and the same with the government in almost every country, including the US. And so they really just don't know, and they're just confused. But thanks to the internet, and almost everyone now is on smartphones, almost anywhere in the world, really, they're going to get access to this information over the, right now, actually, there's major changes happening around the world, and it's just going to increase. And governments are going away. I wrote about that the other day. I was saying that it's very, you just see what happens to all the U.S. government officials lately. Just in the last few weeks, Michelle Obama had to cancel an appearance because there was a major protest about her coming to some school, I believe. And then there was Eric Holden, or Holder, whatever his name is, the gun runner, the Fast and Furious guy. He was going to do some sort of speech, and he had to cancel because there was too much protests. This is happening all over the place. It's happened with almost everyone, including George Bush. He didn't travel to Switzerland a few years ago because they were threatening to actually imprison him as a war criminal, which he is. And same thing with Dick Cheney when he went to Canada 2 years ago. There was major protests, and he actually said he won't go to Canada anymore because it's too unsafe for him. So people are waking up, and it's very exciting times for people like us.
Oh, I completely agree with you. Yeah, you're on fire there. I almost hate to have you stop. It's a good thing we got you for a little bit more. But I want to move this over from not just Galts Gulch, but over into investment land itself, because the last time you were on the show, I didn't get really a chance to talk to you about this. I want to get your input on what you think's going on with gold and with Bitcoin investment-wise. Which ones maybe the move as of right now that you'd be moving on? I know Garrett has a question about silver too. After you answer those questions, maybe I'll let Garrett go next, and then Kyron has a question for you as well.
Sure. I think gold, silver, and Bitcoin are different things. Gold and silver are very similar, but Bitcoin's a totally different animal. Gold and silver, I'm incredibly optimistic and bullish on at this moment in time. I actually haven't been writing much about it or talking much about it for the last 2 years because I was expecting a pullback. I didn't think it would go this far, but it did, and I didn't see any real impetus for that to change, so I haven't been talking about it. But just in the last few weeks, I've been starting to say that I'm getting incredibly bullish on the precious metals and also the precious metal stocks. If you look at any sort of numbers, it looks like the bottom is definitely in, and there's the environment for these precious metals is never been better, I think, in human history. Every single thing that you would look for to be bullish for precious metals is all very bullish for precious metals. Things like inflation. Every single central bank on earth is inflating at very large levels, often into the double digits or quite a ways into the double digits in some countries. You're seeing all sorts of financial problems, all sorts of banks going under all over the place, including, of course, last year in Cyprus, Greece, the year before. It's going to happen all over the place. The entire financial system's in a state of collapse. So I don't even look at gold and silver as a way to make a lot of money, even though you probably will. But I look at it as security because all the fiat currencies are going to disappear in the next few years. It's basically baked in the cake at this point. And so it's really for security. Now, Bitcoin, on the other hand, that's a totally different animal. That's a new currency that just came out in 2009. It really started to catch on last year. And it could really go anywhere. There's really no way to gauge it, but I'm incredibly bullish on Bitcoin. Again, not necessarily to get rich off of owning Bitcoins, although you probably will if it goes the way I expect, but just as another way to hedge myself against the coming collapse of the entire statist financial system. And I've been at many Bitcoin conferences over the last few months. I was just at one in Mexico City a few weeks ago. I was one in Toronto the week before that. Before that, I was in Austin, Texas. I was just in Cabo San Lucas, where we had a Dollar Vigilante wealth management conference, where we had a person from Bitcoin Angels there. We're talking a lot of Bitcoin stuff. I'll be going in the next few weeks and months to Washington for a Bitcoin conference, Chicago, Carolina, Shanghai. And at all these conferences, you're just seeing an incredible amount of enthusiasm and excitement and a lot of money coming into it, a lot of venture capital. There was a graph done recently that showed that in about 1993 to 1995, there was about $200 million worth of venture capital funds came into internet stocks. And this is the very, very early days of the internet, of course. And the graph showed that it's been about 160 million to date put into Bitcoin. And I've always compared the very early days of the internet, which was a evolution in communications, to the today's day of Bitcoin, which is still very early days, which is an evolution in money. And so they're very different animals, but I'm highly bullish on both of them. If you're talking about risks, I don't see much risk at all in the precious metals right now. If Bitcoin, there is some risk. You never know what's going to happen. This is a new technology. Anything could happen. It could go to zero. It is possible. Highly unlikely, in my opinion. It's more likely to go to 100,000 than zero, in my opinion. But it could go there, so you don't want to be putting all your money into these things at all. They're very speculative, but if they turn out the way that I expect, they will go up hundreds or thousands, or in Bitcoin's case, tens of thousands of percent. So you don't need to put a lot of speculative capital into it to take advantage of those gains.
No, I agree with you 100%. I really do. And in fact, I think you answered Garrett's question. Is that correct? Did you want to add something to that, Garrett? Go ahead. I'm going to open this up to the panelists now. I got plenty more questions for you, Jeff, but I'm going to get to the panelists here and let them go drill you for a second, then we'll come back to me. Go ahead, Garrett. Did you answer?
Yeah, specifically, well, just about this $18 to $19 range for silver. Do you think that range is the bottom end, or do you think you could see it still go back down to like the 2004 levels where it was $4 or $5?
$4 or $5 is pretty much impossible at this point. There's been so much money supply growth since then, and like I said, all of the everything is bullish for the precious metals. Absolutely everything. It's a really strange time right now because we're seeing things like the Dow Jones just hit new highs, but that's almost all just based on the amount of inflation going on. So a lot of the money's going into the stock market right now, but that's going to stop. And actually, I wrote, actually last week, I had one of the best picks of my life in our Dollar Vigilante newsletter. When Twitter was at $46, I said, I think it's time to short it or sell it, basically. And it's $30 right now, and that was a week. So that was really good. And I said I'm expecting a lot of upheaval in the stock markets. That will drive a lot of money all over the place, and I think a lot of it's going to go into precious metals. I think I've never seen it more bearish in my life, actually, than right now on the precious metals and in the precious metal stocks, which is crazy because, like I said, this is about as good as it gets as far as an environment for the precious metals. Just goes to show just how the public's mood can really swing. But you don't really hear anyone talking much about precious metals anymore, and I like that. And that really shows that it's at or near a bottom. I really don't see hardly any downside to gold or silver right now at all for the foreseeable future. Actually, I think it will surpass most people's expectations in the next 12 to 18 months.
I agree with those. Go ahead, Garrett. Sorry.
Here, do you think that Bitcoin will also take some of the fire out of gold and silver as that as the transition comes from them taking money out of stocks and putting it into, or value out of stocks and putting it into other assets?
No, because Bitcoin's such a small market. There's only about 11 million Bitcoins, I believe. So that means it's got a total amount of Bitcoins outstanding is around at today's value around $4 billion or $5 billion. There's trillions of dollars worth of gold on Earth. So even if Bitcoin if double the demand went into Bitcoin and all of a sudden it went back to $1,000, that would just be $11 billion. That's really a drop in the bucket. Gold trades, I believe, hundreds of billions, or I forget the exact amount, but it's a massive amount every single day, way more than the total amount of Bitcoins every single day, probably every hour. So no, I don't see Bitcoin taking away from the precious metals at all anytime soon. It would really take a Bitcoin price well north of 10,000, probably 100,000. Then at around 100,000, it might start to take away from the precious metals. So no, it's not, and that's one of the things that a lot of people say, especially the old gold bugs. They seem to think of Bitcoin as a competitor, but it really isn't. It's actually just another alternative. Both Bitcoin and gold have things. One has something better than the other. And for example, Bitcoin, it could go to zero. It is possible. I don't think I think that's a highly remote possibility, but it could. Gold is not going to zero anytime soon unless human beings change quite dramatically, and they just stop caring about it all of a sudden. But I don't see. So I think gold is, if you're thinking more about safety, I would go for gold, and if you're thinking more about taking some risks, I'd go more towards Bitcoin. But I actually own both, and actually own much more precious metals than I own Bitcoin.
Well, I'll tell you right now, I don't think it's that gold's going to hurt Bitcoin or Bitcoin's going to hurt gold. I think it's going to be that gold and Bitcoin hurt fiat. So that's a good thing. That's what we want, right? So the less people that are in fiat or believe in fiat or use fiat and trade fiat, the better, because it is backed up once again by the violent monopoly of the state, right? Garrett, did that answer your question? Can we move on? Okay, good to hear. All right, so Kyron, I want to open this up to you. Do you got a question for Mr. Berwick tonight?
Yeah, I did. And I just wanted to be clear. When you say gold, are you saying like gold is in the bonds or stocks, or are you saying like actual metal, like having the actual metal?
Yeah, I'm definitely saying the actual bullion, the actual metal. Things like gold ETFs, that's not gold at all. I expect gold ETFs to collapse with the financial system. And the whole point of owning gold really is for safety and protection. And so to own it as a paper asset, which is tied to the financial system. I'll give you one example. In 2009, during when the financial system came very close to collapse, and all they did at that point was they decided to go towards hyperinflation. They just decided to print money until the system dies, and that's where we're still at today with QE to infinity. But there was many ETFs that just stopped trading because these ETFs are mostly just paper assets. There's oftentimes not even a lot of hard assets behind them, and they're actually backed by banks. And so if the bank goes under, the ETF goes under. So absolutely do not own gold ETFs and think of it as you're owning gold. You can own it as a trading position if you think you want to do a short-term trading position because it's easy, but don't think you're owning gold when you own an ETF or anything paper. Definitely I'm talking gold bullion. And one thing I should add to that is it's not only important to own your precious metals, well, it's definitely important to own precious metals, but not only is it important to own them, but to own them internationally, because it's not outside of the realm of possibility that governments, as they start to collapse, and they're actually already collapsing as they continue to collapse, that they just continue to take more and more of their own tax slaves' assets. And it's not like this is crazy. This happened in 1933 in the U.S. Americans had their gold confiscated in 1933, and they weren't allowed to own gold in the land of the free until 1973.
You can keep it, Jeff. If you like your gold, you can keep it, okay?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's really important to be. This is I call this the most dangerous time in human history for capital. There's going to be so much capital being destroyed in the next few years, and so you have to think outside of the box a little bit. You definitely can't listen to all the old ways of doing things. Own some gold mutual funds. Forget about anything financial. If it's paper, if it's in a brokerage account, pretty much forget about it, except for with the one exception of gold stocks. So I'm talking mining stocks. If you want to speculate in those, they could go up thousands of percent in the next few years. The key is going to be to get out of them, get into fiat, get out of fiat, and into something like Bitcoin and real gold before the whole system collapses. So this is why I'm saying it's going to be incredibly dangerous. And no one's ever seen this before. We've never seen an entire global fiat currency system all collapse. And that's what's going to happen because the US dollar, of course, is what's backing almost every currency on earth. That's why they have these US dollar reserves. And when the US dollar goes down, everything else is going to go down with it. Everything else paper. And so all fiat currencies will return to their intrinsic value of just being a piece of paper with dead criminals printed on them. And in the US's case, maybe a pyramid with an all-seeing eye.
Good stuff. All right, Kyron, I want you to go on, buddy.
All right. Now, my questions that was just a question that popped into my mind as you were talking about gold and just clarifying that. So I thank you for answering that. I watched one of your talks about how to build a multi-million-dollar agorist enterprise, and I was listening to it and was curious about when you talked about getting a citizenship outside of your country where you have to pay taxes, and was wondering if you offered a service to do that for people, and which countries, if you're willing to tell, would you suggest that people get their second citizenship or change their citizenship over to so that they can live sort of a tax-free existence?
Yeah, what I was talking about in that talk was something called the permanent traveler or prior taxpayer theory or lifestyle, and it's a way of living that, if you're able to do it, is the most freest way to live in this status world today. Because what you do is you have your citizenship in one country, but you don't live there. You have residency in another country, but that country doesn't have any taxes that apply to you or have 0% income tax, but you don't live there either. Then you have your businesses in another country, usually almost always a country with no corporate taxes like Cayman Islands or Bahamas. And then you try to live elsewhere as a tourist. And the reason you do that is because the government treats tourists pretty good because they see you as bringing something into the country, and they'll even give you your sales tax back and things like that. So I try to live wherever I live as a tourist. And so yes, we do offer these sort of services, and this is really growing, as you can imagine, a really growing business. We have TDV passports, which is just at tdvpassports.com, and we help people get foreign residencies and citizenships. It's not that easy to do on your own. It's actually almost impossible to do on your own. I've tried it, and that's why I started this company, because I went through years of trying to do it in a Caribbean country, and it was a disaster. So we've spent a number of years working with very solid agents and our own staff in different countries. And you were asking about which country is best. It really depends on what you want to do and all sorts of things, because there's different price levels. Some are, none of them are cheap. So if you're talking about wanting a second passport and you want to actually, pay to get it instead of getting it through, for example, if you're a Irish heritage or something, you can sometimes, or Italian, you can sometimes get those passports through that. But if you actually want to get it and you don't want to go through the process of doing it long term, which most of these countries it'll be years, and you actually have to live in those countries for those years. It's not cheap. It usually starts around $20,000 for the cheapest ones, and the most expensive, they go up over 5 million euros in Malta and a few other places in Europe right now. There's all sorts of things in between. There's some that are 30,000, some that are 90, some that are 220,000 euros. There's also things like there are all sorts of requirements. So some have easier requirements, some you don't have to ever live in at all, some you have to stay there for a while. So it really depends on what you're looking for. But it's really impossible for me to say. It's not like I can just say, do Paraguay. That's the one. Everyone do Paraguay. It really depends on what your needs and wants and your particular circumstances are.
Great answer, Berwick. I want to, Kyron, does that answer your question on that? And do you have another question?
Yeah, and I just had one last question. And
Go for it.
When was the last time you've been in the studio? Uh, when was the last time you made a rap song?
This is awesome. Go ahead.
I think that
You
was.
made any agorist, anarchist rap songs, and would you be interested in making one?
Well, I have a funny story. I was the number two white rapper in Canada in 1989. That was the last time I was in the studio, which was just my house. Funny story was, it was around 1990, and I thought, man, rap is dead. You know, like we've done it all, everyone's done everything. And so I was a little off on that one. Although listening to today's rap, a lot of it, I think I was sort of right in a way because just a bunch of people jumping around talking about rims and chains and stuff. That's not really all that great of rapping, especially compared to the old great ones like KRS-One and all the old school guys. But yeah, I got out of the business a little early, and but no, I really have no intention of making a 20-year later comeback into an anarchist rap. There's many other great rappers which I love, including Immortal Technique, Vinnie Paz, numerous great rappers who are actually speaking truth and basically anarchist ideas through their rap. And I'm actually probably meeting Immortal Technique this weekend in Los Angeles, so I'm quite excited about that. I'm going to see if I can get him to admit he's an anarchist and have him on Anarchast.
Oh, that's going to be awesome. Good, no, good question from Kyron. Great answer from Jeff. It would be nice to see you have an agorist rap video too. So make sure you have a cameo in it at least, okay? Yeah, but we got to move on. Marky, you got a question for us real quick? Let's go with her.
Yeah, thanks to the internet. Jeff, what do you think about the future of statism? Of course, short-term people are going to hold on to it, but what do you see the long-term for statism? Are people going to lose it and gain towards freedom?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic. What I'm seeing in the world today is dramatic. I think many of you have probably seen it too. I don't know about you guys, but when I first really started getting into freedom, anarchy, libertarianism, it was around 2004. And actually, most people I knew didn't even know what the word libertarian meant at that time. And definitely no one had heard the word anarchy used correctly. They'd only heard it used by the media saying it's communists who break windows. Already there was a dramatic shift by 2009 when I started the Dollar Vigilante. The word libertarian was becoming quite popular at that point, mostly because of Ron Paul. Today, of course, the word libertarian is very well known in the U.S. It's almost a totally well understood word, which is strange because most people in the U.S. don't understand any words really. But actually, you can kind of see people like Glenn Beck, who's not a libertarian, call himself a libertarian. He's a neocon, and you can see people like Bill Maher, who's a total liberal, call himself a libertarian. So it's actually like the cool thing to be now. And I actually think anarchists or ANCAPs, anarcho-capitalists, which is what anarchists is going to be by far the next coolest and biggest thing. And not just cool, it's going to be real. We're seeing things that I never thought we'd see in 2004, things like people calling for the end of the Federal Reserve. This has all just happened in the last few years, and a lot of it was started by Ron Paul. We see all kinds of just an amazing shift in people understanding these sort of concepts. And you're seeing the GOP, the Conservative Party, Conservative Criminal Party of the U.S., that is large factions of the Conservative Party are realizing that they have to become libertarian if they're ever going to get elected again. What they don't realize is if they really go libertarian, then that will be the last election, and then they'll just close the door and we'll actually have peace and prosperity and freedom after quite a interesting transitionary period. No, I think things are happening dramatically. I've been talking about this so much. I've been shocked, just even month by month now. For example, there was a poll of younger people, and they asked them what's their confidence in things like the president, the government, the Senate, the mainstream media, things like Supreme Court. And it's down. It was at 40% had confidence in it just 2 months ago, and this month it's 30%. That's a pretty massive change in a couple months, and that really echoes and mirrors what I'm seeing happening all over the place, and not just in the U.S., all over the world.
No, I completely agree with you. And one of the things I see too is a lot of my friends who originally had like some kind of a preconceived notion towards one party. They just don't support the party anymore like they used to. It used to be, I really like this party or I really like that party. I hear a lot less of that than I used to, 10, 15 years ago. So I do agree with you. I think we're taking some positive steps. Great question, Marky. Great answer, Jeff. I got to move on. Stephen Shedd, you are next panelist to go. What question you got for Jeff?
Yes. Hey, Jeff. Really good to be talking to you, kind of person to person. My question sort of goes along the line of Marky's question, and it's sort of, what is your view on how much effort voluntarists should put towards disrupting the state? I've seen before that you've said something along the lines of we don't need to do anything since the state will eventually destroy itself. How do we interpret that? How do we understand that? What's our role as just the commonplace anarchist who's just trying to live day to day?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm all for pushing things forward as much as possible, but my point in what you might have read was that I don't think we really have to do anything. The state is collapsing all on its own. All of these 100 years of socialist ideas, communist, which is basically what's been going on in the U.S., and fascist, I call it fascio-communism in the U.S., has been going on for 100 years, and it's built up so much debt now. And this is not just in the U.S., it's all across the Western world. It's really all across most of the world except for places like China and Russia, which is funny. That's the new freer places that don't have all these socialism and debt. So yeah, I don't think we have to do anything. It's going to collapse on its own. The dollar will collapse all on its own, even if none of us ever talk about Bitcoin ever again, even if none of us use Bitcoin ever again. It's just going to collapse all on its own. This system is in a terminal state now. There is no way, if you look at the numbers, that any of this can be turned around. You're starting to see a massive awakening amongst people. As Mike pointed out, it used to be people would say, oh, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, and now they both just hang their heads and go, they're the same thing. We've been fooled, we've been tricked. People are figuring this out very quickly. So it's going to collapse all on its own. And as I pointed out, I think in a recent thing I wrote, that eventually, I think what's going to happen, we're seeing all sorts of secession movements right now. And I always say, if at first you don't secede, try again. And we're seeing that happening all over the world right now, including in the U.S., many states. There's parts of Colorado, California, Texas, of course, always wants to secede, and you're seeing that in Spain, all over the place. People are starting to do that, and what I'm hoping happens is that people do start to secede. We start to see, for example, in the U.S., it go down to 50 states, which are all sovereign governments. And then we go down to every city becomes its own sovereign government, and by that point, everyone's going to start to realize this is all just silly, and then eventually, hopefully, we'll get to 7 billion sovereign governments on Earth. And I think the only downside to that I've been thinking about is the opening ceremonies of the Olympics is going to be incredibly long and tedious, like even more longer than it is right now, longer and more tedious than it is right now. It's going to take a while, but I think it'll be worth it.
It's going to take a year just to do 4 years just to do the intro. So that's why they did this 4-year thing. Okay, gotcha. No, that's hilarious. I love it. Peter, Shedd, did that answer your question? I hope so. And if so, we got to move on. If not,
Yeah, good. Thank you.
We got to move on. Peter Parsley, what's up, buddy? This is Peter from the Seasteading Institute. He's going to be a panelist with us tonight, so everybody welcome him. And then I'm going to ask him if he has any questions or comments for Jeff before I move on to my question.
Hey, Jeff. Pleasure to speak with you tonight. I think you've done an excellent job with the dollar vigilante, and I want to know what your advice to anarcho-capitalists who are looking to convey their message in a way that doesn't turn off minarchists and people who are on the verge of becoming voluntarists, who they're interested, but they just feel like spooked about making that final move.
Yeah, great. I'm also a big fan of seasteading, so great to have you on here. I've gone through many different phases in my thinking about how we can most affect people and wake people up. And I used to be, when I was a little younger, a little more aggressive, like, we got to, fight the system. We actually got to, fight these people. But when you think about anarchy, it's a completely peaceful ideology. And for us to be going out, and as much as they do deserve it, because they are aggressing against us with all the things that the state does, including extortion, which they call taxes, and kidnapping, which they call prisons. But I don't think that really furthers what we're trying to get across to people. I think much like Gandhi, who wasn't an anarchist necessarily, but he was most of the things he was doing at the time were very anarchist-like. And he overthrew all by himself and through his ideas the British Empire. And I think that's much more the way to go about it. I don't think we're going to get anyone to wake up to what we're talking about by yelling at them. I think one of the things that I've really sort of tried to adopt when I'm talking or debating anyone is to be incredibly calm, let them say as much as they want, wait until they're done, and then just bring up rational, logical information. And if they cut you off, just be silent again. Let them see how ridiculous they are, because we don't need to be shouting. We don't need to be pushing these ideas on people, because these ideas are just real ideas. These are virtuous ideas. These are all we're saying is don't beat up someone else and don't steal their money. So we don't really need to be pushing that too hard. What we really need to do is to get the message across in a way that what I'm saying is in a very calm manner, very rational, until they realize they're all just jumping around and shouting and saying, no, we have to steal, we have to kidnap people if they do things that I don't particularly like. And after a while, I think they start to see how silly they look. And so I think really the approach is to do things like that. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we shouldn't get out there as much as possible. But it's got to be our ideas. It's to just spread these ideas, spread these memes, try to be kind of funny about it. A lot of those memes on Facebook, they kind of wake people up. And there's that old saying that if you're going to tell people the truth, you better make them laugh or they'll kill you. That's sort of true with these statists. So kind of be laughing about it, be calm, be rational, of course. And actually, Mike Shanklin had a video on his Facebook page the other day of these, what they called anarchists, of course, on TV. They were a bunch of communists, obviously. And they were going down, they were like roughing people up and yelling at reporters and stuff. And the reporter was just asking them what it is that they're for, what it is they're marching about. And all they could, they couldn't even come up with a reason. They just said, we just hate you guys. We hate you. And
they did not use the Socratic method. Well, that's needless to say. Yeah, I'm agreeing with you. It was horrible. Those people, they just ruined the message of anarchy. Even if I'm glad they're not ANCAPs, right? I'm glad ANCAPs that I know don't act that way.
Well, that was the question I had, and I'm wondering if anyone on the panel has the answer, because I don't have the answer. Why do ANCAPs never have like parades or marches or protests like out in public? I don't think I've ever seen that.
Because you're trying to make money.
Yeah, we have to pay for all the other statists, right? So, remember, capitalism's been funding the rest of the state forever. So that's the reality, though, is we do have to work so hard to go make our living, and we actually are the producers, and they're the extorters, so they can steal and hire people. Just they don't have to worry about opportunity cost and efficiency or any of that. Where they can just blow the money and steal it and whatever, right? But we're the ones who actually have to go out there, and we can't steal from them. We have to get our money the right way, so it takes a little bit more time.
I think also, like, thinking a bit further on it, all the things that these people want, these communists and any sort of people who are protesting, usually they're protesting because they want some sort of law, or they want someone kidnapped, or they want more people to get robbed. Yeah, collectivism, right? And so they have to push that, because that's not really like a message that a lot of people are like, yeah, I really thought about life, and I think what I want to do with my life is to extort people. They really have to push those ideas, whereas we don't really have to push it too much. We just sit in the background and go, you guys are brainwashed slaves and idiots. And that's basically all we have to say.
That's one way to say it. No, I mean, it really is sad. This is a pretty voluntarist show, so we do use a little straightforward language here, sometimes brutalist if you want to put it that way, but it's a joke too. But no, great answer for that, Peter. I hope that answered your question. Did you have anything else to add to that?
Well, I completely agree with what Jeff had to say. I think that the idea of keeping your calm in situations where statists will oftentimes try and almost make it a point to get you to sort of snap, which is a common theme I tend to notice when engaging in debates. Even if they're friendly, it always seems to hit a point where they try and guilt trip someone who's not in the same position that they are into making themselves look like a bad guy by having them raise their voice and lose their cool. So, no, I think you answered all of that wonderfully. Thanks.
All right. Hey, I got a question that I want to open this up one more time to the panelists. We don't have too much more time with you. I got to get your opinion on on the whole Clive Bundy thingy. What's going on with the Bundy Ranch scenario? I want to get your 2 cents on this. You don't have to dwell on it. Just I'm curious to hear your input on it.
Well, I wasn't all that, following it too much, but the one thing that really struck me as I watched it on the internet was that the people at the Bundy Ranch were fighting back against the federal government, of course, and it was really just kind of, when you just looking at it, not thinking too much about it, it was just some guys on horses with shotguns, and then you had the government on the other side with drones and snipers and tanks and SWAT teams. This old idea that they had in the U.S., and it was a decent idea. It wasn't great, but it was, for the time, it was okay. That every few decades you have to replenish the tree of liberty with blood. So what they were saying was that governments are always going to get out of control, and you just have to at some point kill them all, which is interesting. That why would you start it in the first place then? But it's gotten to the point now where 200 years ago, sure, it was like, I have a musket, the government has a musket, we can maybe fight it out. I don't see there's so many still of Americans who think that they're going to be able to win a war, like a shooting war with the government. If you just looked at the Twitter remarks to that Bundy Ranch, there was so many Americans that were saying they wish that the U.S. government would just drone bomb the Bundys. So you're not only fighting the government and all their guns and drones and tanks and billions of hollow point bullets they've purchased now for the Department of Homeland Security, and they're listening to everything you do. They know where you are at all times. You're not only fighting that, but you're actually fighting a large part of the population who has, for whatever reason, and we could go for hours on the reasons. Things like public indoctrination camps, schools, which were designed to make people submissive and respect authority, doing their Pledge of Allegiance every day like a religion, standing at national anthem before a hockey game, and doing taking their hat off and fluoridated water, and you could go on why they're like that. But there's a lot of slaves, I call them, that are just they're not on the freedom side, and you're fighting against them too.
It's funny too about if we're looking at the state as a religion, with the Pledge of Allegiance, it would have been blasphemy to the Christian religion had they not altered it and added the word God, right? Which then all of a sudden completely flips it around, because then it makes it look like the religion is a part of the government instead of it being really like two different religions. Like there's Christianity, just like there's Judaism, and then there's this third thing called the state, which is another, the belief in authority, the belief in the aggression principle. If it's just kind of funny how it would have been blasphemy had they not included the word God, right? The state would have been blasphemy, but they knew that the two needed to be together. You have to combine the religion of Christianity or Judaism or Islam or whatever religion is out there with the state religion and make it look like it's the state's not the religion, it's the religion that's the religion, and that you somehow have the freedom in there, but then you have this Christian nation. It's so muddled that they only sell you the good, and they never tell you about the bad. I just kind of find it funny how the Pledge of Allegiance, from a Christianity perspective, would have been blasphemy had it not been for them including the word "and God" in there, or it's just in God we trust and all this nonsense. It's just kind of funny, looking back on it now. Anyway, I want to open this up. I think Kyron's got another question. Go ahead, Kyron.
All right. I am someone who is very interested in building and specifically building houses that produce their own utilities, electricity, drinking water, and actually grow food. What are sort of building restrictions that are out there that you know of, where just about anything goes as far as what it is that you want to build, if you actually want to live in it? And have you sort of, as someone who is kind of in real estate from your videos, have you started to do any development, and what issues have you come across as far as permits and bureaucratic institutions are concerned with doing so?
You cut out for a little bit there. You're probably in a third world country, so you don't have very good internet. But I think what your question was is about self-sustainability and places that you're able to do that easier, if I got you right. And the U.S. Is just there's something called Agenda 21 from the United Nations, and they actually have a plan to actually get almost all Americans off of farmland, and we're seeing that all the time. That actually was part of the reason why they were doing what they did with the Bundy Ranch. We're seeing small farms being shut down all the time. Michigan just outlawed small farms in many areas. They're doing this all the time. SWAT teams are raiding raw milk places and organic farms. There was a lady, I believe, in Florida or somewhere that she was trying to live off the grid, and the government came in and basically destroyed her, I think, through numerous fines and threats of putting her in a cage because she was trying to live off the grid. So the U.S. is not the place to try to live this sort of lifestyle because they're really going after that. Now, almost every other country on earth, they don't care. The governments are in almost every other country on earth are just nowhere near the size of the federal government of the U.S., and they don't have nowhere near the capabilities, and they don't really have the interest to do these things. So you can live those sort of lifestyles, very sustainable lifestyles, grow your own food, your own drinking water, all that kind of stuff, almost anywhere else on earth except for the U.S., where it's getting harder and harder. And people are going to wake up over the next few years as this continues to realize what's really going on. And they're really just trying to make it so that everyone's can't be self-sustaining, and they have to rely on the system. They're going to try to start to move them all into the cities. That's part of Agenda 21. And they actually want to, it's really a bizarre concept. They want to put people into little tiny houses that are like 5 feet wide. This is literally in their plans. And and they really seem to be focusing on the U.S. because that's where they have the ability through the government to make people do these things, because there's such overwhelming force by the U.S. government. But yeah, anywhere else on earth you can do whatever you want. I'm here in Mexico right now. I can do anything I want. The thought of a police officer showing up in my house is basically unheard of. That would never happen. Actually, the Constitution of the U.S. of Mexico, which they still adhere to, unlike the U.S. In many ways, the police aren't allowed to ever go on your property without permission. And if they want to go on, they need a warrant. And those warrants are not like they are in the U.S., where they just have like a robot just spinning them out like every few seconds. It actually takes sometimes weeks to get a warrant. And they just don't have that sort of a culture. Here in Mexico, and this is the thing that a lot of people in the U.S. don't understand, they'll hear about maybe a cop gets beheaded or shot in Mexico, or a mayor gets killed, and people in the U.S. go, that's terrible, that's anarchy. And they're kind of right, it is kind of anarchy, although it isn't completely, because there is a lot of state stuff still here. But what happens is, if a cop ever does anything to hurt anybody, everyone will kill him, for sure. And it's very just different. It's a different way of approaching the state. And it's funny because, of course, the U.S. thinks of itself as the land of the free, and they think of Mexico as a poor third world country, whereas it's really changing dramatically. Mexico's stock exchange is up 400% in the last 10 years, huge economic development. And they really just don't put up with the government here. Whereas in the U.S., if someone's beating up their friend, if a cop is beating up their friend, all they'll do is say, "Sir, please, sir, stop." Anywhere else in the world, almost, you'll have 30 or 1,000 people come out, and they'll string the cop up. And I think that's better than the way it is in the U.S. It's unfortunate, but that's how we have to deal with some of these issues that statism brings into our lives.
You know, it's a really sad topic that we even have to talk about self-defense, and I'm not afraid to talk about it. You know, I think some of the people in New Hampshire, with the you know, as if everybody in New Hampshire is the same. I don't want to collectivize them either, but people from the Free State Project have really taken a bad taste to even talking about self-defense. I think we have to talk about it, and then maybe even talk about how it's implausible for us to actually defend ourselves right now, and that's the whole point, right? It's not like with freedom, you can defend yourself, and everybody knows you can defend yourself from a criminal that's a private criminal, right? If they come up to you, some guy tries to rob you or murder you or kidnap you, you have the right to defend yourself, and everybody would stick up for him. But you know, it just doesn't work with the public sector that way, and we do need to point out to others, hey, this is really the way it works, unfortunately. So, hey, Jeff, listen, I've kept you here too long. I do appreciate you coming on the show. I'm going to have you back within the next 3 months. How's that sound, buddy?
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you, Jeff. And you know, you're always wonderful, and you're always more than welcome here on Voluntary Virtues. So I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.